Hi, everyone. It's Nina Collins here today at the Wolfer with Mollie McGlocklin, who is a podcast host and newsletter writer, has a company called Sleep is a Skill. So we're here to talk about sleep with Mollie. Hi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy about this. We've had so many different back and forths. You were a resource for me for some work that I was putting together for Sleep is a Skill. And then we just released our podcast with you literally last night. So we'll be doing promo on that. So everyone check out that with Nina, just tons of wisdom. And yeah, so I'm so grateful to be here over on your platform.
Yeah, no, and then I realized we've been going back and forth. Mollie and I actually met through a Wolfer, through Jill Strickman. And sorry, I'm
It's
still
amazing.
a little funny because of my braces, but Jill is a great longtime Wolfer, and I've, of course, like most menopausal women, had various bouts of insomnia. And when Jill and I had lunch maybe 2 years ago, she was telling me about her nightmare sleep issues and how you had kind of saved her life. So this is actually long overdue. We should have done this ages ago. I'm very, very happy to finally meet you.
Oh, I'm happy we're doing this. This is awesome.
So you have this whole business. I saw the other day, I guess in one of your newsletters, that you were on Clubhouse, by the way, for 4 hours.
4 hours.
Sleep. That sounds, you made it sound like it was fun. That sounds kind of like hell. But
there's a lot of emotions.
Emotions. So tell us, I know a little bit from your website, but it's also just intuitive that presumably you've developed this specialty because you have a personal background with it. I assume
Yes.
you had terrible insomnia. You also look pretty young. So I'm guessing you're in your 30s.
Yes, exactly. But I'm right on that cusp of how you said in the podcast that at 35, as early as 35, you can begin having that perimenopause symptoms. So I'm so grateful to have gone through what I went through, ironically, even though I felt like there was no silver lining when it happened, because now it really has transformed my health and well-being. And then to be surrounded by so many fantastic thinkers and people like yourself that are making a difference in this area so that we can navigate these different states of our life with power versus just being at the effect of.
Yeah, at the mercy of just our biology or whatever, and
Yeah.
anxiety. And I mean, it's lucky that you've conquered this topic now, because for most people getting older, sleep is an issue. It's actually not for me at the moment because I'm on hormone replacement therapy. I'm on progesterone. So I actually sleep like a baby now.
Oh,
In fact,
that's
I like
amazing.
my sleep so much. I have incredible dreams. I could spend my whole life in bed. I love sleeping. But in any case, and as you know, I started the Wolfer community because I couldn't sleep at age
Yes.
6. So it was a, perimenopausal classic insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night. So just tell us about you a little bit, Mollie. Like, how old were you when you started having trouble sleeping, and what did you try, and like, what's your and what were you doing professionally before this?
Yep. Yes, I'll tell you the whole story. Okay, so yeah, because it's really important to the understanding of sleep as a skill, because what's unique about it was that it was really solving my own problem with my own sleep, and also I want to certainly put out that I did everything not to do around your sleep for years. All the things that they say don't do, I was doing all of those, and then that ultimately, so part of the story that's important is for many years I just had a lot of labels around my sleep, and it really looked like, oh, I'm a night owl, I'm a bad sleeper, I'm a short sleeper, I'm an insomniac, I'm an anxious sleeper, I'm all these different labels that I would operate within, and had an experience like, well, that's just how it is for me, it's fixed, it's part of my genes, that's the lot in life I have. But I really didn't think too much of it. I thought I was operating within those boundaries. And it wasn't until I went through my first period of insomnia, and this was all, I was living in Manhattan, working as an entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends, getting more and more extreme on my night owl habits. And at a certain point was going to bed at certain times, sun's rising, birds are chirping, and I'm going to sleep.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and
you were extreme.
Right, exactly. And also then I would be like justified and righteous about it and say, "Oh, well, I can make my own schedule, so I'll sleep in and no big deal." Not connecting my kind of failing health in certain areas. I got shingles, I got gastritis. I was getting sick more regularly, more frequently. My anxiety levels were going up and I wasn't quite making the connection of living in that manner as having a say in how that was all going.
Mhm.
Um, and so it kind of just kept going like that for years. But then, when right around my 30th birthday was when it started getting really extreme. And that's when, shortly around that, my fiance, and I had started traveling internationally. And that's when I added, it was before our businesses were ready for this. We were like, okay, we're going to digital nomads. Here we come. And our businesses were not ready for that one little bit. And the stress, I started having anxiety attacks, and I started particularly having nocturnal anxiety attacks. So it would be when you're aiming, obviously you want your cortisol to be falling in the evening and melatonin to be rising, but I was experiencing kind of the opposite of that and getting the most stressed out of my entire day during those periods, and then having those anxiety attacks. If people familiar with that, then it's unlikely you're going to be falling asleep anytime soon after something like that.
I have to say I'm feeling super maternal right now. I'm thinking
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Right.
about my daughters who are in their 20s and how much anxiety there is just being a young person, and how much we don't often think about our health enough
Yes.
when we're
Yeah.
younger, right? So we do all these things. I mean, we do it all through our lives, but it's particularly a young woman's crisis, I think, of not
Yes.
really putting all the pieces together. So very interesting. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's such an important piece of this because I think there was clearly so many signs that were happening along the way for years and years and years that I just wasn't tuning into or listening to in a particular way. So you make a fantastic point there, because then I happened to then reach this. This was in my life, one of my biggest rock bottom moments, and how it manifested was not having what felt like the access to sleep. And it just went, there was days and days and days. And at my lowest point, we were in Croatia, not speaking the language. I can't sleep for days, basically. And we went to
Oh,
the doctors and with Google Translate and say, I can't sleep, help. And, they just didn't really know what to do with me per se. And then just left with sleeping pills. They had their version of Ambien, generic version. And so then, in that moment, it was a very scary period for me, because it felt like an identity crisis of, oh, am I going to become this person that's going to be reliant on these things
yeah,
for the rest of my life? I've seen instances of that, of people close to me that have gone down that route. And what I saw was not something I wanted to be bringing
yeah,
into my life, but at the same time, desperate for sleep. So it was like,
yeah.
this, what do you do? So that was the most important crux, which then shifted my whole life, because then I just went, I'm pretty obsessive personality. So in this case, it's probably partly why I got to that point. But then on the on the flip side of it, it ended up having me go down the rabbit hole of understanding really what would it take to shift my sleep. And it had me turn my life really upside down. And then once I started restoring my sleep, not only coming back to homeostasis, but then beginning to optimize my sleep to sleep levels that I had never thought possible for myself, and the consistency around that, I could not stop talking about it. Started
Mhm.
working with different people more organically. And then it grew into kind of small groups, online course, the newsletter, podcasts, and just this, whole kind of community has gotten turned out of this, what originally felt like a problem. And that was the other important thing for me, is that I felt very alone at the time, and I would literally look for sleep support groups, and I
Yeah,
just couldn't seem to find anything. So
you
it
needed
was
community. You needed knowledge and community and research, and you turned it into a career. It's pretty
exactly. And that's what I so appreciate, what you have done too, is
yeah,
really just, something wasn't working for you, and then
similar
camaraderie, the
path. Yeah,
yes.
and very similar motivation also. I needed to talk to other people. I needed information that I wasn't getting. It's really very
Yes.
similar. It's fascinating. All right, so it seems like from what you talk on your website about chronobiology, so I'd love
Yes.
to explain what. So on Mollie's website, it says that she focuses on accountability, technology, and chronobiology. And so one of the things that I think makes you unusual in the sleep world, it seems, is all the gadget stuff,
Yeah.
tech aspect. So I'd love you to talk about that a little bit. Um, I'd also, of course, like to hear about your own. I mean, I assume you sleep really well now. Is it ever a problem?
Yeah, great questions. Okay, so well, one, so for the chronobiology element of things, for sure, so one, I was
What does
not
that even?
attuned.
What does
Right. What does that even mean? I
chronobiology
was not
even mean?
attuned to this for so many years. So what that is really just boils down to the science of time in a lot of ways and how time impacts our biology and our health. And so it's understanding of these rhythms that we are attuned to, or that are really innate, but then have exist on a spectrum. So, namely, in the conversation around sleep, certainly circadian rhythms is one of the big rhythms that we would be tuning into, and understanding that they exist on a spectrum. So, it's not just like, oh, we all have this circadian rhythm, that's it. It's really, do you have a weak circadian rhythm or a strong circadian rhythm? And where are you falling on that spectrum at any given point in your life? And for the most part, even just as a looking at how many of us live in our modern societies, it wouldn't be crazy to then assume that many of us are kind of functioning closer to the weak side of that, right? So
Hmm.
if that's the case, then we start what the framework that we utilize at Sleep is a Skill, from this concept of optimizing for the strength of that circadian rhythm, is actually another term within any chronobiology textbook, which is known as circadian rhythm entrainment. And it's the process of entraining your circadian rhythm to move a bit further on that side of the spectrum.
So, is the circadian rhythm connected to? I remember a great book that I read that I think you and I may have discussed.
Oh,
Wake,
the dark. Yeah,
Waking Up to the Dark. Like,
waking up to the dark. Exactly. I
yeah, that's
love
a really
him.
interesting book that my friend Cindy Spiegel, who's also a wolfer, published at Spiegel and Grau, and it's a book about um, getting in tune with light and dark, right? And it's a book
Yes.
about how before electricity, people would go to sleep earlier, and they would often wake up in the middle of the night
Yes.
and go back to sleep, and that's when people would often have sex. Or
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a really interesting book. So how does that connect to circadian rhythms?
Yeah. So really great point. Very interesting book. And he also, I had the opportunity to speak with him, actually, thanks to that connection with you, which was fantastic.
Oh,
So
good.
eye opening. Really recommend that. And he pulled from a lot too. He was really inspired by a book called Lights Out, by T.S. Wiley. That's pretty interesting too. But so pulling from understanding that light is on that circadian rhythm entrainment framework. It's
Mhm.
the most important, most crucial, highest impactor, or called time giver or Zeitgeber. It's time giver is the translation.
Yeah.
And essentially, it is telling our body what time of day it is. And why that's so important is because a whole cascade of results kind of happen depending on what time it is perceived by the body. So that's why, there's can
But
be,
jet
when we're
lag is so hard.
yeah, exactly. Why jet lag's so hard, why shift working is listed as a possible carcinogenic. There's so many things that are have kind of concerns around just all cause mortality when we are falling off course of that rhythm. So if light is one of the number one time givers, then what becomes really important in that is not only just because it's not the answer to have 24/7 light. We see in certain parts of the globe when that does happen, it can be very disruptive, Alaska, what have you, during times of the year that can be disruptive to sleep. So we're not saying, all light all the time. And we're also not saying all dark all the time. We also see that in parts of the globe that's problematic. So we're looking for that balance. And since we're diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active during the day and at rest at night,
Mhm.
then that's where it becomes so crucial for us to align with those rhythms. So even though now a lot of what I'm speaking about, I'm talking about gadgets, I'm talking about, whatever, red light, like this stuff and all these different things, I know,
Tell us
all of
about
this.
that.
Right, exactly. Just all the things, but at the same time, so much of this is really to strip back to how things were more in hunter-gatherer times for thousand and beyond, for thousands of years pre faux light, pre the ability to have 24-hour sleeping rhythms, and for any class, because previously it was even you had to be very wealthy to have access to lots of either candlelight or lanterns or whatever. And so now it's across the board. We can really disrupt our patterns. And so what
Right.
happens when we disrupt those patterns is that we see a disruption in our hormone production of just one problem, but just in this conversation with sleep, then often there's that lowering of melatonin production in the evening. So you're having shortened total sleep time. Whereas with that book that we were mentioning, with kind of the two-part system to the sleep and that almost biphasic sleep, then the thinking was particularly, say, during times like the winter, you see that in New York or what have you. Where it's sun sets at like 4:30 and then
Right.
it's dark. So back in the day, it was often not much later after that, you're pretty much going to sleep. And then so from that place, you would have much, much longer periods of time to play with for your sleep time. And so that would also make sense that there would be, or could, from that theory, that there could make sense that there's a time that would happen when we wake up. And then that would be a creative time, sex, conversations, whatever. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but to interrupt, but so the connection to light reminds me of, I mean, one of the common tips you hear is that it's very important when you wake up in the morning to expose yourself to the light for at least 15, 20 minutes, right? To really
Yes.
jolt your body with light. And
Yeah.
that seems like it's connected to what you're saying, right?
It is because, and that's one, I'm so glad you said that because that's like, if people get nothing out of what we're discussing, I hope that that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that morning light. And, but also not just relying on it behind a window, because certain researchers out of Stanford, Jamie Zeitzer, who we actually had on the podcast a while back, who's brilliant, has really alluded to this concept that if you're being exposed to light behind a window, it can take anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer, some of their findings,
Hmm.
to set that master clock versus just getting yourself outside to that full spectrum light, so that it's not kind of it's adulterated when it comes through or changed when it comes through the window. So getting yourself outside can really make a big difference for that setting. And what is this setting is basically our master clock, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is within our brain directly behind our eyes. So that's what's so interesting about it, because with that, that's why that light part is so crucial, because there's other things that will influence what time the body thinks it is, but that light part is so big because the eyes are directly connected with the brain. It's really a part of the brain, which many of us don't think about. I certainly didn't for all those years,
Yeah.
as being an aspect of that. But with that, that's part of that time giving. So you want to do that each morning, really make a ritual out of that. And even if you're only getting a few minutes, that still will be beneficial. So doing that first thing is going to be big. And then there's other ones we can talk about.
I get up super early for me, 7 a.m. is super early to walk my dog. He wakes me up
Yes.
and I take him out and then I go back to bed and I usually sleep for like an hour and a half more, which is
Yes.
my favorite sleep of the day. So I
Yes.
wonder if that early wake up light is good for me. Who knows? I don't know.
Okay, so the early wake up light, or the timing of when you get your kind of first bright shot of light,
Mhm.
has a real cause and effect of when you're going to get tired later in the evening. So that's why it's such a big thing, is that it kind of calibrates the course of your day and at what points you're going to kind of slump, what points you're going to feel more sleepy and all that. So you can strategically, like if you are going to have a long haul flight, or if you actually want to stay up later for whatever reason, you can delay that shot of light and that will help with you getting tired
Help your
later.
body.
Yeah.
Interesting. And it's very important that you go to bed at the same time every night, more or less, right? Isn't that another
Yes.
thing for the same reason, kind of the way it affects your biology?
Yes, exactly. Because so for me, since so much of my story has been that mental health aspect of stress and anxiety and just, oh my God, am I losing my mind? Why can't I sleep? All of these things. One of the I've related to now sleep optimization is really just such an important like tool in my toolkit of maintaining anxiety levels, and
Mhm.
really just seeing, because when we do have that variability, the sleep architecture gets disrupted, and then so you might have more a shifting of more deep sleep, less deep sleep, more REM, less REM, or often more just light sleep is really the concern when we do have a lot
Mhm.
of that shifting. And so with that, then our ability even for that mental health component really gets disrupted. That's just one, but then there's so many other things, glucose levels, you're craving certain things, your cardiovascular health, immune system. You might be finding you're getting sick more often. I mean, just the list is endless with what that can do for overall health and well-being. But for me, it's particularly important from that also just productivity standpoint.
Yeah.
So
So consistency is really key.
yeah, exactly.
And what are so I have a lot of friends who end up addicted to like Ambien or Clonopin
Yes,
for sleep issues, right? Which I'm sure it's very common. You see
definitely.
it all the time. And it seems like the basic sleep things that I always hear about are kind of the same. Like no screens before bed, no
Yeah,
alcohol a few hours before bed, no caffeine in the afternoon into the evening.
yeah,
Um, no screens in the bedroom. I'm trying to think of all the obvious things that you hear all the time. No screens in the bedroom. Bedroom only for sex and sleep. Window treatments. A dark room.
yeah,
Um, if someone follows all of those things and
yeah.
still can't sleep, then what do they do?
Yeah, great question. So one, um, it's sort of a two-part response if they are already using any of those sleeping aids, because that does sort of shift some of the conversation a bit. But either way, because just knowing that that might take a little something else, there might be other steps. But either way, no matter who you are, really what we're often trying to do is create that kind of consistent count ownable structure of both two-part system to our day of what we call day mode and night mode, so that you are getting, but also, so you're getting as much of that sunlight that we spoke about, but you're also being in alignment with your body temperature. So, body temperature is a big one in this conversation, for it's the second most important time giver for sleep optimization and certainly, but circadian rhythm entrainment. So, coming from that place, then you want to ensure that some of the activities that you're partaking in during the day are where your high body temperature activities are. And then in the evening is where your low body temperature activities are. So, speaking to what you said, there's like kind of the same list that we all often know. We might not always do it, but
Mhm.
so say if people are kind of doing those like key things, then some other things we might want to look at are one, I found that this relationship to meal timing is often misunderstood of how much that can make an impact, and that falls under that same domain of temperature.
Temperature,
Yeah,
so no exercise and no food before bed.
yeah, and what's so weird about it is people will say over and I know I would have said the same thing was, well, I'm not eating like right before bed, or I'm not, I have plenty of time before that. But even what we'll see is that we've still moved many of us as a society out so much further than sunset. And if you think about just the pragmatics of how we likely would have evolved, it would have been likely that we would have been eating very close to when sun is still present, or maybe around a fire, but not much later than that. Not to like the points that were, Netflix, popcorn, wine, like, 11, 12, whatever's going on. But so even with that, even I've seen 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m. dinners affect the heart rate and HRV of some of the clients that I'm working with. Because again, I bring in so much of the wearable conversation. It provides
Right.
another lens for us to see kind of what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And for some people, it's more exaggerated than others. But a great resource for this is Circadian Code by Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute. Got really fantastic research over 20 something years of research looking at our first bite and our last bite as telling the body some real cues as to what time it is. And, there's talk of this having been a bit of a hack for people, for pilots or doctors or people that are having to work on odd hours, to strategically eat when you have to stay up, because then that it one heats up the body just.
The body. Yeah.
Yes. And so it's a counter signal to, because what we're trying to do is we're really trying to make this all automatic so that we don't have to think so much about it. And eventually, when you put in all these habits, it really does just become like, that's how you live. Like you don't even
Right.
think about it.
Yeah.
But until then, it can be weird. Yeah, go ahead.
So if you want your body to be cool, do you also want to sleep in a cool room? I prefer to sleep in a cool room.
Yes, you definitely want to sleep in a cool room. And so naturally, I do tend to work with a lot of kind of biohackers, or even, I mean, I've got like, men and women in their 60s, 70s that I'm working with, and then somehow become biohackers after just like going into this realm. So they're getting whatever, the chili pad, which is a cooling mattress, or 8 mattress, which also is a cooling kind of apparatus for your
So
bed, or
also good things for menopausal women, obviously, for the
yes,
hot
exactly. And a bed jet, which I know you had mentioned
yeah,
too on the
hilarious.
podcast. Yeah.
Have you used a bed jet? It's so funny.
I have. I used it back in New York, and it used to be so hysterical because it would just be like we had this white thing. It was like a mushroom.
For any of you who are listening or watching and don't know what it is, the bed jet is like an air conditioner for your bed. And the way I used it when I was having horrible hot flashes is I would wake up at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., getting really hot, and I would just hit the remote control. You just kind of get used to it. And then my bed would fill up with cool air and I would go back to sleep.
Yes.
Kind of ridiculous, but fun.
Exactly.
Cool room. Okay, so quickly to technology.
Mhm.
So if you've tried all these things, if you
Yeah.
don't have screens in your room and you go to bed at the same time and you keep your room
Yes.
dark and blah blah blah, and you're still having trouble, technology is a way, presumably. I don't
Yeah.
use gadgets, but it
Sure.
sounds like there are a lot of them now.
Yeah.
You can get help really understanding in a deeper way what's going on with your body. So what are some of your favorites, and what is that red light you just showed us a
Oh,
second
I know. I didn't mean to like be alarming. So
ago?
this is actually I got a lot of gadgets over here. So this one is at a sauna space, no affiliation, just happen to have the it's a heating so it's red light therapy, but it has a heating element because it's they're part of a sauna company, so it has heat too. But so, bring it back to the gadgets. There's a lot of different things that you can do for your sleep. If right now you're struggling with your sleep, one of the first places at this point in 2021 that I have actually all my clients wearing this one is the Aura Ring, spelled Oura. Again, no affiliation with the company, just think they're great. Um,
Oura, Aura ring.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like this. Yeah, it's so you
Okay, so
sleep
you wear
with
it
it.
on your hand.
Yeah, you wear it on your hand, and then so what I tell everyone, so if it's someone's listening and they are wearing either a hand or wrist tracker for their sleep, and they are getting stressed about sleep class categorization, so meaning like, oh my god, I only get like 10 minutes of deep sleep, I only get whatever REM. I tell people really to not look at those for the most part on these, because unfortunately they're just not that accurate at the moment. The class categorization, when you compare them to PSGs, there's lots of
What are
oh,
PFGs?
oh yeah, so it's the kind of gold standard for looking at your sleep. So
Oh,
polysonogram, when you go into a sleep lab. So
okay.
as of right, and even that has its own fault. It's not infallible right now, but it's still our kind of top. And then these wearables, they tend to do a pretty good job with the following: knowing when you fall asleep, or so when you are asleep or when you're awake,
Mhm.
knowing when you woke up, and somewhat the duration. But then the other really interesting ones kind of reflect are metrics that reflect your recovery throughout your sleep. So HRV, heart rate variability, is one that we talk about a lot.
Mhm.
So that one, it just is a measurement of your autonomic nervous system. So it can be really helpful again with that mental health conversation, because if you're really stressed, obviously the nervous system is going to respond and not quite be recovered.
Right.
At,
So it's a
right.
good way to know really what's going on for you psychologically while you're sleeping, if you're
Exactly. And it's psychologically too. And then also, because HRV is such a big number, such a big metric, it also is tracking, your physical recovery. So if you're overtraining, if you're eating foods that aren't agreeing with you, if you're in an environment where the air quality is not great, if you're sick, so that's why it's getting a lot of attention for COVID kind of spotting.
uh-huh.
And then also in comparison with, along with that, and getting to the women, the topic of women, body temperature readouts are super helpful too for sleep. And so Aura does measure that.
So
And so
how does
what's
Aura work? Does Aura connect to your cell phone? Is there like an app?
yeah. Yeah, there's
It's
an
just a
app.
ring that you wear on your finger.
Yes.
And do you read it? I can't really see it. I'll have to Google it. But
Oh yeah, Google it. Yeah. So it's just plain old ring. So you don't see anything on the actual ring, but
uh-huh.
then on the app, you can upload your information. People like it too because you can wear it on airplane mode, but still get the data. So if you're concerned about EMFs or any of that sort of thing, and it's infrared tech too, so it's a little more
And
friendly.
how much does it cost?
That one's at about 300 right now. And so what I have everyone doing is at least wearing those as a first step. And there are other ones. It's, that's just one that happens to be particularly user friendly and specific for sleep. And they also, the body temperature one, what's really helpful for women that are still of menstruating age, to see when they're going through luteal in
Mhm.
particular, and seeing the disruption that can often come from sleep during that period.
That's
Uh,
interesting. Yeah.
it's super, super interesting. And it really seems to empower women to go through that period. It certainly has for me, that's for sure. But to empower women, because then you get a sense of, okay, I know what's happening with my body. There are actual changes.
I'm ovulating, and this is why I'm
This
having.
is why, yeah, and
That's
then you can
very
take different,
cool.
right, you could take different actions. You can shift your food type because our glucose goes up during that period. There's all, all those things. So
Yeah, you
that's
know not to drink it. I mean, if you drink more when you're ovulating, you might. Yeah, yeah.
exactly right. So
And
that really helps.
the ring also looks good. I have to say, I recently had a cardiology checkup, and they want me to wear a heart rate monitor sometimes. And the Fitbit, like they're so unattractive. Like I like that ring. That looks cool.
Yeah, and there's different colors, and again, no affiliation, but
No, I've
just
never even heard of it. I'm just glad to know about it. I'm so
yeah,
glad.
yeah, absolutely. And so
Aura ring.
yes,
Oura. No affiliation. We're just interested.
yes. Highly recommend for just a starting place for then at least getting a sense of where you're at with your sleep. Because often sleep can be that gray area of like, I don't know, I went to bed at this time, I woke up at this time.
Yeah.
Uh,
What
you
else
know,
am I supposed to know?
yeah,
All right. So I think that the main takeaways here, guys, are that everyone should check out, if you have a sleep issue, you should definitely check out Mollie's podcast, Sleep is a Skill, and her community and her courses and her newsletter and the whole Mollie McGlocklin world. Um, and I guess what I've learned from this is, I mean, again, I sleep perfectly right now. I'm really,
it's
really
great.
lucky, although maybe not forever.
Yeah.
But we all know it's pretty easy to find out what the basic rules are around sleeping. And as Mollie pointed out, you may not follow them, but if you do follow them, they really should help. All those, no lights, routine, etc. But if that's not working for you, it might be time to avail yourself of all this technology that exists right now. So something like the Aura Ring or all these trackers, and then
Yeah.
maybe you need to get the help of someone like Molly who can kind of help you interpret it and make sense of it. You really don't want to be addicted to drugs for sleeping.
Yes, that's the biggest takeaway. That's a
Yeah.
super important takeaway because what we see, I will often have people coming my way that have been on some, benzodiazepines or hypnotics for just years and years and are really finding themselves at a, hard place
No,
of
they're
what
really
to do.
bad for you. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously all drug addiction is bad, but
But
ambient addiction is bad.
particularly those 2 classes, and then the going through the experience of often rebound insomnia that comes as a result. So what often the reason you got on it is now comes back and kind of with a vengeance for a little while. So it can just be challenging for people to. So ideally, if you can preemptively do everything possible to not go down that road. And I don't want to be disempowering for people that are taking some of those things,
Yeah.
because my heart goes out to people that are, in this between a rock and a hard place on what to do. So there certainly are many, many success stories. And that's what my fear was when I went through what I went through was all I'm here. I go down, forums or, different groups and just seeing all of these stories of people. Well, yeah, get comfy because you're going to just be going up on your dosage for the rest of your life. And
Awful.
so it doesn't have to be that way.
No, and your community sounds super helpful. I mean, obviously not being able to sleep makes people crazy. I mean, it literally is
Yes.
why I started
Yeah.
the community. It's really awful when it
Yeah.
happens. And so you want to be surrounded by people who really know what they're talking about and have a lot of
Yes.
information to share. And you sound like a great resource. So
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And same to you. I really admire what you've built and what you're continuing to build and
thank
be
you.
such a big fan.
Really fun to meet you in person. And
Yes, same.
we'll keep talking. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right. Take care, Molly. Bye
You
bye.
too.